Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching the first interview in our new Talking Local interview series. In the Talking Local series, we'll be chatting to the great and the good of the local search world and finding out about the work they do, the insights they have into the local search industry, and also what motivates them. What makes them get out of bed every day. I'm very excited to kick off the series by interviewing the one and only Mr. David Mihm. Hello, David, and how are you doing today?
Hey Miles, doing well. Thanks so much for the invite. It's a little early out here on the west coast of the United States, so forgive me if I have any slip-ups, but looking forward to our conversation.
That's fine, David. I'm sure you'll be absolutely brilliant. So I'm sure that David needs no introduction for many of you, but in case you're sitting there scratching your head, you're wondering who this guy is, let me give you a bit of background to David. David is a highly regarded and respected local search expert. He's the director of local search at moz.com. Prior to Moz, he started and ran getlisted.org, which he subsequently sold to moz.com. He's the curator of the widely regarded and widely used local search ranking factors study, of which we'll be talking about quite extensively today. He's also a founding member of LocalU, and to really kind of cut to the chase, there are very few people out there who know more about local search than David, which is why I'm extremely excited that I can encourage him and entice him to be interviewed today. So David, thank you very much for that. So David, when you started the local search ranking factors study, which so many people use extensively today, many people plan their businesses around it. Did you have any idea that it would ever grow to be so important and so well used by people in the industry?
So it's a great question. I'd like to say that I had the foresight to see where local search was going back when I started it in kind of 2007, 2008. I would say that I certainly hope that it would be useful to the community of local SEOs who were doing search optimization campaigns for small businesses full time. But that community has really grown by leaps and bounds over the last 4 or 5 years. Google has increased the number of search results that showed local businesses. Obviously, with the advent of mobile search, it's become so important to so many more people than I expected. So, I think I really have to thank the kind of initial local search community for coming on board with that survey, and I'm glad that it's been useful for so many people, and just appreciate everyone's contributions over the years.
Great, David. Thank you. Obviously, because it's so widely used by so many people, it's an incredibly important piece of research. I think it's now into its 6th year as you've been running it. Do you feel any pressure because of how widely used it is and anticipated it is? So when you're kind of putting it together every year, do you kind of feel any kind of pressure to kind of reinvent it or to make sure it's as current as it possibly can do? And how much of your year is sort of spent working on it? Is it a lot, or does it kind of run itself these days?
Yeah, so I mostly focus on the survey for about a month. I'm not sure that it's a full-time job for that month, but certainly 20 hours a week, something like that, for the month leading up to the publication. Back when I was running it on my own on davidmihm.com, a lot of that time was spent actually building out the pages themselves, right? I didn't have any contractors or anybody helping me with the design or anything like that. Now that I'm over at Moz, thankfully a lot of that stuff has been taken up by our design department and our inbound engineering department. So I get to focus on what I think is really the fun part, which is figuring out how to ask the questions. If we need to ask about any additional ranking factors that have come up over the previous year, things of that nature. I think last year we had a little bit of a different framework for asking the questions. I sort of wanted to split up the foundational ranking factors from the sort of more advanced ranking factors. And the reason for that is I felt like the audience for the survey over the years has really kind of bifurcated. there's certainly in the early days, everyone was a beginner in local search, ourselves included, with the folks who participate in the survey, and so I think we were all sort of learning together, learning at the same pace, and most search results were just not competitive, right? I mean, if you've heard of the factors in this survey and were taking advantage of them, chances are you were ranking pretty well ahead of your competition. I think over the years, as more and more people have been optimizing for local search, there's a set of readers, there's a set of agencies and community members and professional marketers who really need to know, okay, well, I've already done all the baseline stuff. What can I really do to move my clients in competitive markets? And so that's kind of why I split the questions the way I have. And then just from an organizational standpoint, just tried to make the survey as quick as possible for the experts to actually take. I think I've definitely taken their feedback into consideration over the years, and trying to make the survey drag and drop and just as easy as possible so that it doesn't eat up an inordinate amount of their time.
Yes, I'm sure, and it's obviously great that you get those guys to contribute. I mean, big thanks to them as well. And so I've studied the sort of ranking factor survey quite a lot. Looking back over the 5 years that it was run, and the key thing that sort of stands out to me is how much more granular now the study is, how much more kind of sophisticated the analysis is. You've broken down the number of factors from quite large, kind of chunky factors. As an example, there was I think in 2008, there's maybe 1 or 2 factors around citations. There's now maybe 6, 7, 8. It's really much more granular. Is that because Google's algorithm has become so much more layered and sophisticated for local, or is it because our knowledge has moved on, that we're able to appreciate the different factors that might go into the algorithm, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, I would definitely say both. I think it's primarily the latter. I think that probably many of the, especially as it relates to citations, many of those factors probably were present at the advent of when Google started rolling in local search results. I think our knowledge over the years and our experience working with clients for the last 6, 7 years has certainly enabled us to try to be able to tease these things out a little bit more. So, and I would say, not. I wouldn't say that the survey is an attempt to sort of re-engineer the algorithm. I don't think that's really what we're getting after. It's more a matter of which tasks would we focus on if we were optimizing a given client or a given company's web presence. So there may be things out there that Google is looking at that we're not even taking into consideration. But I think we're trying to, with the survey, we're really trying to get dispense as much practical advice as we can to this community of local search marketers.
You talked a bit there about, I guess, the changing face of the local market and it becoming much more competitive. Do you kind of have a sort of a kind of gauge of how much more competitive it is to do well in a local now as it was back in, say, 2008?
I wouldn't say I have any kind of absolute gauge. I could certainly give a relative example. I think in 2008, the local business center had just been launched the previous year. Google allowing people to, or a few years before maybe, but fairly recently, and there weren't that many claimed businesses, right? So there weren't that many businesses out there with rich information about themselves. And so just the very act of claiming a Google local listing and adding categories, and hey, if you had a keyword in your business title, that was probably enough to rank #1 in just about every market. And I think today that's it's certainly still a foundational element. I think it's one of the first things that every local business should do when they're getting started marketing themselves online. But that act in and of itself is probably not going to get you anywhere in the search results. I think today it's more of a much more important factor just for conversion to make sure that people who actually visit your Plus profile, your Plus local profile, know that you exist and that you're an ongoing business. But I think that to judge if you're asking about how much harder or how much more competitive is it, so there's a step that probably took 20, 30 minutes, 2008, and you would rank #1. I think now we're probably looking at, if you want a really solid long-term presence, you're probably looking at 20 or 30 months worth of work, especially in a market like, real estate or law or travel, these competitive markets where that's the amount of effort required if you want a sustainable, #1 or top of the search results presence.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think it's a common question people get is, how long does it take to see an impact through sort of local search kind of optimization? Well, it varies depending on the competitiveness, of your kind of sector and location. But yeah, looking back to 2008, it sounds like life was a lot easier then for SMBs and CAs. What factors are you expecting or anticipating might have changed for this year in terms of the kind of what's gone up, what's gone down in terms of significance and impact as a ranking factor?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've seen a fairly consistent algorithm the last few years. I think when Google Plus first came out, we were all expecting, I think when it first came out, everyone had basically the same opinion, which is that, yeah, it's out there. We don't think it's going to be an influence for a year or two. Well, now Google Plus has been out for a year or two, and there are any number of factors that you could ask about related to Google Plus, like +1s on a website, and number of circles that the business is in, those sorts of things. I'm still not sure that those would really move the needle in either a baseline setting or even a competitive setting. So I think that the mix of factors is more or less constant these days, and it really is the businesses that are doing well across all of those factors that are the ones that are ranking at the top of the search results. I do think that one area that I'm paying particularly close attention to, just sort of on a theoretical or a sort of a patent level, our mutual friend Mike Blumenthal has written some posts and done presentations about the impact of mobile behavior and even desktop behavior on rankings for local businesses. So, for example, if you've got a Google map embedded on your contact page with a link that says, click for driving directions, those sorts of requests are very indicative to Google of a strong intent for visiting the business, and so they're really they're quite an interesting indicator of popularity. There are certainly some things that go into the extent to which those factors can be gamed, which I think significantly mitigates the sort of the absolute ranking power of those types of factors, but I think that we're getting, as Google's algorithm becomes more sophisticated and more mature, I think on the kind of the baseline level, I think that they are going to be taking many more sort of real-world indicators of businesses' popularity into account, and especially now that half the world is using Android devices and a lot of them have location enabled. Google's acquisition of Waze probably has helped them ingest some of this real-world data about who's visiting what. We may start to see those types of factors play a role in the future, and I started to ask about them last year, and I'll continue to do so in the 2014 survey.
Great, that's really interesting. Moving on a little bit from the survey, when you're what issues? What do you think that the key or the main issue that SMBs face in today's world when they're marketing sales online? What do you think the kind of #1 issue they face is?
Yeah, I think it's probably the same issue that businesses of all sizes face, which is sort of the fragmentation of the online market and not having the time or the expertise to be able to perform well, across all segments. I think in some sense, visibility today is a little bit analogous to visibility in the kind of mid-2000s when Google was just really taking off, right? You worried about Google and the yellow pages. Well, now you're probably worried about Google and Facebook and Pinterest, and there's still sort of a, everybody knows that they need to be performing well in Google, but there's still this other set of media that people know that they need to perform well in. And in some cases, print and traditional media still really works well for given industries, or especially in smaller markets, I think, where their audience might not be so sophisticated. So I think it just like it always has, sort of boils down to fragmentation of the market, the time required to do well across multiple areas, and as new media forms come online and gain adoption, the expertise required to succeed in those, is pretty overwhelming for a small business owner.
Yeah, it certainly is when you kind of throw in those things on top of running a small business, all the operational aspects that they have to deal with. You can see why so many of them either shy away from online marketing, get frustrated about it, or ultimately, or hopefully, go and use the services of a reputable agency. And there's such a focus in the industry on kind of local data issues, kind of cleaning up your kind of NAP information, making sure that it's distributed as kind of cleanly and accurately and consistently, across the board. For me, it seems like such a basic issue. It's like getting your basic business information right, and in lots of places. It's always a hygiene factor, and yet it consumes so much of our time and attention. Whereas really, we should be focusing on hopefully some much cooler, more interesting, or even glamorous sort of tasks, except cleaning up data. Do you see a time, anywhere in the short term, long term, when we will no longer have this issue? It'll be solved by some sort of business or other. And have you got any kind of inkling of when that might be, or who might be the person to come along and do that?
So I certainly don't see any change in the short term. I think that that Google doesn't have a good enough data set yet in and of itself to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to sort of stop taking feeds from various primary data aggregators to help sort of augment our business listing. I think that they probably have the top of the market covered quite well. Here in the United States, I think the estimates are probably something like 25 or 30% of businesses that have claimed their Google Plus local pages. So I think that the popular businesses are probably fairly well represented. I think that the quality of search results, though, would degrade pretty substantially if Google sort of removed the backfill that those aggregators are providing them in smaller markets and less popular industries. So I don't know that, and the U.S. I think is probably well ahead of the rest of the world in terms of sort of data quality across the board. I think it significantly degrades when you get into some of these European markets, certainly the emerging markets like Brazil. I think it's very tough for Google to say, oh yeah, we're going to go it on our own. So I think that there's still going to be this fragmentation issue, even at Google, where you really do need to do, as you said, I think an appropriate word, data hygiene for your business listings. So I don't think that that's going to change in the near term. The other thing I'd say is that as Apple comes along, as Facebook now seems to be getting very serious about places with switching out the place information that Instagram uses away from Foursquare to their own, with the who knows what the next hot app will be. Right now it's Pinterest, which is still using Foursquare data. Who knows what the hot app will be in 2016. I think that there will always be a need for a non-Google business listing source, and so I think that you're still going to continue to see some place for aggregators in the market. I don't, who knows what those aggregators will be. I think, as I said, in the U.S. it's still the same ones there have always been: Infogroup, Axiom, Newstar, LocalEase, and then Factual is a relatively new player that I think is increasing in importance. But I think that you're always going to have some place for data aggregation in the ecosystem moving forward, simply because there will be competitors to Google that do continue to gain traction and adoption, where you'll want to make sure that your business is represented accurately.
Great. Well, I watched your video about the how kind of local data gets into the ecosystem, through obviously kind of aggregators, governments, and individuals. I thought it was really good and really kind of well explained. So if anyone out there watching this who hasn't seen David's kind of Whiteboard Friday video, go to moz.com to the local section and look out for it. It's a really good and very simply explained insight into how data gets out there about local businesses. So moving on to, I guess, kind of more about your kind of individual situation. Obviously, you ran getlisted.org. That was sold to Moz at the end of 2012. How's it been moving from, kind of running your own independent business, where maybe you had to do everything yourself, as you implied earlier, the early days of the ranking factor study, to being part of the Moz team? How's it affected the way you work, the opportunities you have to maybe kind of execute some of those kind of grand plans that you'd have loved to do, kind of back in the day, and how's it generally affected your life making that switch?
Yeah, I would say that the transition to Moz has been about as smooth as I could have expected. It's really the first. It's not the first company that I've worked for, but it's certainly the first, I would say, real job at a company that I've had. And so there have definitely been some adjustments with respect to being available for meetings and needing to communicate a little bit better with my coworkers and things like that have been I think healthy learning experiences. The great thing about Moz is that it's a very open and transparent company, as many people probably know from our tag fee motto. And so I certainly haven't felt constrained or sort of I don't know what the word would be, but restricted from doing and saying the things that I would like to do. I think software is a very hard business. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I've had in the last sort of year and a half, and we were really excited to actually get Moz Local out the door, the first version, and we'll certainly be continuing to iterate on that product. I think now that it's out, I am going to be focusing a little bit more on research projects and sort of generally getting a little bit more back in the weeds on what's going on in local search, doing some more webinars or interviews like this, some more blog posts, things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to sort of swinging the pendulum back to more in the middle, from consulting to software, and now somewhere in between. So I think that's what's on my sort of projected roadmap for the next 6 months.
So is your role at Moz then, obviously wear many hats, you've been focused on the development of the software and kind of getting that right. Were you kind of brought in to be a local evangelist, to do your research under the Moz banner? I guess I'm trying to understand, was it the software, or was it your brain that was the kind of sort of driving force around you kind of joining Moz and then wanting to kind of bring you in as the director of local search?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think obviously it's nice that I sort of have a little bit of a presence in the local search community. The combination of the existing Moz brand, which is already incredibly strong, with my name attached to blog posts or speaking engagements or those sorts of things, I think is just a great combination for both of us. But we had a pretty, GetListed was a pretty robust software product. We at the time we sold, we had just about 100,000 business lookups per month in the U.S. And so I think Moz was also pretty excited about the opportunity to reach into a different market than they were currently addressing at the time. I think the focus on sort of professional marketers for Moz, married with a little bit less sophisticated, broader audience that we were typically seeing at GetListed, I think was a nice combination and a good, to use an overused business term, good synergy. So.
Yes, I can certainly see why those two things come together creates a kind of very powerful offering. So last question for you, Moz Local. What can we expect in the next, say, 6 months in terms of features, enhancements, potential rollout internationally? I've seen a few questions regarding that. What can you tell us about the kind of the next 6 months of roadmap?
Sure. So we launched Moz Local just right about 2 months ago. It was our 2-month birthday or whatever earlier this week. So right now we're really actively soliciting feedback from both customers and prospective customers. So if there's something that you would like to see as a user or a potential user of Moz Local, Would really love to get that feedback directly. davidm@moz.com is my email address. Feel free to overload my inbox. I would say our near-term roadmap is a little more clear. We are working on really beefing up our duplicate resolution feature. It's one thing that I see as a big pain point, as you said, Miles, with data hygiene and being able to surface and close duplicate listings efficiently, I think is something that we'll continue to focus on as a primary feature. There's obviously quite a bit of demand for all of the factors that play into local search in some way to assess those and easily address them. So there's a lot of things on our prospective roadmap for kind of later this summer, and as I said, we're really looking at what the community would like to see from our product as a place to start. You mentioned international. I'll just give you a little bit of background on our thinking there. So when Get Listed was still Get Listed back in the sort of late 2012 timeframe, as I said, we had about 100,000 business lookups a month in the United States. We did have both a UK and a Canadian version of the site back then, and we got about 1,000 lookups combined per month in both of those markets. So it was a pretty dramatic difference, and that's a big reason why I've been a little bit hesitant to commit resources so far into those two markets, is that we really feel like we need to really make our U.S. product the best it can be before we move on to international markets. I do think it's natural for us to look at the UK and Canada and Australia, where we've had a lot of customers requesting this product, and we're starting to do that. I've got quite a few friends in the UK data space and in the Canadian data space, and we're making some friendships in Australia. So I think that's if and when we decide to go international, that those would be the first places. But for the time being, it's a little bit more about focusing on making our U.S. product great, and then expanding into other markets.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously we're a software business similar to Moz. We're based in the UK, but over 95% of our customers are actually in the US or North America. So we see a similar demand and a similar kind of scale of demand from that side of the Atlantic, which is interesting. So David, thank you very much. I don't have any more questions. I've taken up a lot of your morning. I'm sure you've got a lot to do, all those meetings to attend. Can't be late for meetings these days. But thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have a chance to speak at some point in the future. Looking forward to the 2014 installment of a local search ranking factor study, and I hope that we can stay in touch.
Thanks a lot, Miles. Really enjoyed speaking with you, and hope to see you at the for all of our UK listeners. I'll be at the Distilled Conference in London in October, so hopefully we can meet up then, if not before.
Yeah, that would be really good. Everyone, thank you very much for listening to this installment of Talking Local. Have a great day.